I'd like to start on time, so if you could take your seats, please. I'm going by the clock up there, so. Well, good morning and welcome to our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting. Today, the 11th of April, no mai haere mai, welcome to you all. We are streaming live, so to those who are watching from afar, welcome to our meeting this morning. Please, councillors and members of the public, if you could put your phones on mute. Councillors, I'd like you to put yours, if possible, off the table. But and if you do need to clear messages at some time, then I'll make sure that we take a break. So thank you for that. So welcome to members of the public, to the press, and to our meeting this morning. No mai haere mai, welcome. Now, apologies. We do have a number of apologies this morning. We have apologies from Councillor Kent, Councillor Tapsell. I understand Mrs. Trumper and Mr. Thomas, you may be leaving early. Is that correct? Councillor Stewart, does that apply to you possibly? Oh, right. We'll certainly try not to go beyond 2 o'clock. And I understand Councillor Gould for lateness as well. Councillor Maxwell? All right, fine. Fine, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm making a note of the times, but we'll put all of those up there, please. So can I please have a mover and a seconder that our apologies be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Carried. Any declarations of interest this morning? Carl, thank you. Urgent items, not on the agenda. Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Probably not urgent, and you probably could advise me on that. Just wanted to know the costing of the sculpture that's going on, the Hemo Gorge, or but basically what my question is, we're hearing about these costs, the extra costs, if there was any expenditure in that for the fit-out cost as well?
Thank you. It's not an urgent item. It is something that obviously it's up for on our agenda, but so not on our agenda today. But this isn't an urgent item. But thank you. I suspect that most councillors are concerned with how things are going along that way. So thank you.
Order, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stewart.
That is a matter for the Operations and Monitoring Committee, and the item was discussed at our last round of meetings and confidential. So if Councillor Kumar wants to refer to that, I'm sure he'll be updated with the current position.
Thank you.
The price has not changed.
Yes, thank you. And I can just say at this point that the price has not changed, but thank you as the Chair of Operations and Monitoring. Thank you. So we'll move then, confirmation of our minutes, agenda item number 4, the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 14th of March. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Mrs. Trumpet. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That those be, or any corrections, amendments, changes? No, thank you. I'll put that motion that they are confirmed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Contrary? No. Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes.
Chair, as you'll see on page 9 of what I've got, the committee recommends to Council the following members are appointed to hear submissions and make recommendations to Council on the draft Hannes Bay Raukawa Reserve Management Plan, of which myself, Mr. Berriman Camp, Paul Thomas, Councillor Tapsell and Councillor Hunt were appointed. Already I understand there's a conflict in terms of meeting times and dates, which will preclude probably 3 of us. So I just wondered if Una could report to us on how she's getting on with altering dates for that.
Thank you.
Yes, we have run into some scheduling issues, and Rick has been diligently working away on finding an appropriate date, and that will be updated in your calendars by the end of today, and it's likely to be the 10th of June.
Thank you. I'm not surprising when we've got how many, 2, 4, 5 people and you're trying to juggle diaries, but thank you for that, Una. Thank you. So we'll go straight to our staff reports now, please. Oh, yes, that's right. No, presentation first, thank you. Item number 5 on our agenda, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Annual Plan 2019 to 2020 consultation. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, welcome to you. No mai haere mai, and I'll get probably Councillor, Councillor Thurston to introduce the panel. Is that correct? Or thank you. Good morning, Lyle.
Kia ora. Kau mātou te kanihira au nā tui moana, ki konei mātou ki te whakahaere kai mahi. I ra rangatira mai, kui mai, koroma, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Nō reira I māti atu te tau whakatahi I manaki, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. You've very graciously given us 15 minutes, so Charles, this will be like the last race at Wingatui, I can assure you. So we would have liked a little bit more time, but I'm sure what you'll see in the content will be of considerable interest to you. But excuse me, if you do need some more time, please take it, because this is important for us as well. I'm guided by you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So I'm joined today by Councillor Winters, who's well known to all of you, Chris Engel, who's our General Manager of Integrated Catchments, and Debbie Hyland, who is our Finance and Corporate Planning Manager. So we're here to brief you on our draft annual plan for 2019-2020 with a presentation, and we will highlight the key points that we're making as part of going out to the public this year. There is an apology from Arapeta Tahana, who can't be with us today, and I think it's appropriate for me to share with you that a formal meeting yesterday, he announced that he's not a candidate in October for the Kure seat. So it's wide open in Māoridom, so place your bets now. So, but no, thank you for having us. It's wonderful to be here, and I will hand over to the team, and who's leading off? Debbie.
Thank you, and welcome to you all this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for having us, councillors. Nice to be back. We're going to be spending a bit of time in Rotorua doing consultation on our annual plan. Just to be clear, the long-term plan is still largely our guiding document. Oh, we've got the IT working. Thank you, Debbie. The long-term plan, but we did decide this year that the annual plan, there were enough questions to decide to have a separate consultation process. And so there are really just 3 main topics, and we spoke about this at the strategy group for the members who were there, Councillor Hunt and Your Worship. The main questions are around climate change, safety and rescue services, so that's surf life saving and similar arrangements, and some work around public transport, passenger transport. So we'll cover each of those off shortly, but the slide in front of you there is to do with some of the consultation, and the first one, of course, is the market day on Saturday, where 3 of us at least will be there from 7 a.m. Well, I don't know if I'll be up that early, but we'll have staff there from 7 a.m. all the way through to 1:30, and trying to get the public to respond to these 3 questions that we're asking. And then on the 2nd of May, we've also got an event happening in our offices across the road here, to do about a Have Your Say event, and that's sort of, we're not having hearings for this, and under the new rules you don't have to have hearings, I'm told, so we're having that instead, and we're also having many other events throughout the region. In fact, I've been involved in several already, and the same questions being asked of all members of our regional community, and we're trying to get their feedback. So next slide. Oh, the whole process is open till the 6th of May as well, and written submissions are welcome as well. So the consultation questions, this is the one that I'm probably most involved in, is climate change. And what the council wants to find out is what type of focus does the community want us to focus on? If we're going to do work on climate change, we want to be doing the right things. And what other ideas does the community have in relation to climate change? So we've put 4 questions up. And they're probably not exclusive. I would suggest that we might do more than one of those. But one is about getting our own house in order and making sure as a corporate identity that we're doing the right thing, that we've got, a vehicle fleet that isn't isn't putting too many emissions out there. We're being as efficient as we can in waste and energy reduction in our offices. The second one's about incorporating climate change considerations in decision making, and I think you'll probably be aware that we as councils already do this to some extent, but we'd be doing a stock take on that and finding out what can we do better. The third one is services we provide, and this is something in terms of flood protection, I'm well aware of, but also the bus fleets that we run, and can we do better in that space? And then the fourth one is about building resilience overall and working on a regional response to climate change. So that would be something I think that we'd work together as with all the district councils as well, and see if we can get that sort of critical mass by working together. So those are the four areas that we're seeking feedback on, and any other ideas that people have, I guess. And for the next item, I think we were going to get Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just continue on with our questions that we want the public to give feedback on. This is something very dear to me in terms of regional safety and rescue services. It's similar format to what's already happening in Waikato Regional Council. This is the question, should we fund rescue services across the bay? And that means things like surf lifesaving, Coast Guard and land safe. And everybody does their little bit in terms of rescuing when we're on our lakes, rivers, beaches and bush. And should we collectively as a regional council help these services fund the services? This is just a question this year. It's yes or no. There's no money set aside for this year. It is just, should we do it or shouldn't we? The regional council, Waikato Regional Council, put about $4 per ratepayer into this service, and it's right across the Bay of Plenty if we decide to go ahead with it. So there's no money in the budget this year. It is just as the question is, should we do it or not? Interestingly, you're thinking, how do Rotorua people benefit from surf lifesaving rescue? Well, I'm told by Surf Lifesaving that about 30% of their rescues are Rotorua-based people. So, you know, it is across the bay. And similarly, Coast Guard rescues, we have people from Tauranga using our lakes a lot. So it's a collective question. No money set aside yet, but it's should we be in this space or not? Next question is to whoever.
Buses.
Colleagues, as you well know, passenger transport's a pretty hot issue right throughout New Zealand at the moment for a wide number of issues. But in terms of consultation with the University of Waikato and with Toiho Mai, we've had representation to say that the cost of travel, be it by a private motor car or whatever, for students in the Bay of Plenty to access tertiary education is prohibitive. And they have suggested that with the opening of the new campus in Tauranga for the University of Waikato and also the two Toiho Mai campuses that we have here and also their base in Whakatane, that we trial free buses to enable students within the Bay of Plenty to access tertiary education. Now, this would be conditional, it wouldn't be falling on the shoulders completely of the ratepayers, but this would be conditional on us getting support from, it's a bit of a three-legged stool, as we all know, public transport, NZTA, and the two tertiary education facilities, as I said, the University of Waikato and Toiho Mai. But I can just share you in a number of meetings that I have had, Councillor Crosby have had. We're sort of responsible for transport in the Bay of Plenty. Julianne Genter, the Minister, is very, very keen to trial. Thank you. Throw my voice at the back wall, Rick, eh? The Minister is very keen to trial. That's why you'll be hearing a number of initiatives that we're rolling out this year, which are essentially trials. So we're going out to the public. Would you be prepared to contribute to this trial for a one-year period to enable students in the Rotorua area in particular to access tertiary education? So that'll be a very clear message, either yes or no, and we will move on from there. So happy to answer any questions. Kia ora tātou.
Oh, thank you. So we'll take some questions now. Thank you, Your Worship.
And just a question on the passenger transport, that's an encouraging signal. Is it incumbent on partnership funding from Toi Ohomai, or is this solely the regional council's contribution?
In terms of what is proposed, Your Worship, as I said, it's a three-legged stool, for want of a description. It's totally conditional on NZTA coming to the party and the two tertiary education facilities and the ratepayers.
Thank you, and thank you for that. And just another question, probably more about what's not there. I remember submitting last annual plan, and it was the economic development component. Is that just work that is continuing, or has it been dropped in favour of these new questions?
Through you. Thank you. The Economic Regional Development Activity has a forecast operational spend in 1920 of around $670,000, largely for the Bay of Connections program.
So that continues. Yes, thank you. Councillor Stewart?
A couple of questions on the passenger transport Mirapara to Rotorua. Can I assume that Kaingaroa Forest is included in that loop? And the second question is, your question to the community is, do you support an increase in rates to trial extra tertiary and commuter bus services? Those four that are detailed there, are they commuter bus services as well as student bus services? Are they combined?
Council, it'll be building in with the existing services, and as you know, in this last triennium we've pumped buses up to Minganui and Ruatahuna, and we've become really inclusive of these, dare I say, marginalised communities. So it'll all be part of a package, you can be assured. So Kaingaroa would certainly be included. But one of the big areas that we got considerable pressure from was from the Mirapara Kaingaroa community, in terms of them being marginalised and students out there just twiddling their thumbs, dying to go to tertiary education. But you know, I think there's an example that's cited in the publication that you'll all get today, like students in some areas, you know, up to $50 a week cost to use public transport to get to tertiary education. So $50 is a hell of a lot of money, we all know, when you haven't got it.
Thank you. Mr. Berriman-Cam?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. My question is predominantly regarding the climate change component. And first of all, great to see that you are engaging with the community on that. But I'm wondering whether you have any specific plans. I saw the...
Can you pull that one back up, please? Can you pull the climate change one? Thank you. It's just helpful when we're discussing it. Thank you.
Couple. Yeah, and working through with those, but I guess it's a two-component question. The first one is, in terms of gauging with the broader community, I'm interested to see those who potentially could be impacted by climate change but who historically don't respond well to surveys or to these sort of questions. How will you get that impact? And the second part of that, I guess, is I'm wondering if you're engaging with Te Uringa or Kia, which is the Te Arawa Climate Change Group, which is doing quite a lot of work in this space. So that's one question. The second question is in terms of reducing carbon footprint in the electric buses, how does that link into potential increased availability of EV charging stations? Is that something within your scope, or is that another entity?
Thank you for the question. I think with the charging stations, the information we've had, and we're doing some work within our own vehicle fleet that staff use as well, and we've just got another 5 electric vehicles added there. So we are looking at that. What we're seeing with the electric vehicles is they're getting a lot better range. So you can actually go up to 400 kilometres now. So the need for charging stations all the way around the place is lessened, I think. So, but we are expecting to see an increase in that, and the government's going in the same direction. So we're just trotting along with them, I think, that's the indication. We certainly are working with Te Arawa on their climate change And in terms of your other question of how do you engage with people who are less inclined to engage, I think that's a challenge for all of us across the board on a number of things. So we'll continue to try and crack that nut, but I don't think there's a silver bullet anywhere in the short term.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to move on to some other questions. There's some others. Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, with Focus Area 3, does that mean the residents of Rotorua can ask questions on the air quality and the lake water quality of the lakes around the area? What council's doing?
Yeah, this is just the highlights, Mark. We are still full on with air quality restoration in the Rotorua catchment and lake water quality restoration programs. They are still full on. So there's no change in the budgets to those. We are in fact, some of our nitrogen purchasing availability, we are struggling to meet the targets, but we are certainly not diminishing the expense, the budget in terms of lake water quality restoration and air quality restoration. We're still foot to the pedal.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, could I have the next slide up, the safety one, please? Yeah, rescue. So, Councillor Winters highlighted, I think, Coast Guard, surf life saving and Landsar. And I just wanted to throw out there, like, you know, you said 30% of the vehicles coming this way tow a boat to go on our lakes. And I would say that probably 30% or more of the vehicles coming this way for mountain biking from the Bay of Plenty. So the Mountain Bike Club have instituted a first response unit, which they're looking to fully professionalise in partnership with the ACC, and we're getting an increasing demographic with out there with e-bikes. So the demand for that service, which is being professionalised with the services of ex-snow ski patrollers, very much in the same model as surf lifesaving. Would you be open to a discussion around, I think it's great that Regional Council are asking this question, do they fund safety services? Would you be open to an approach from that entity?
Take it under advisement, Dave. Yes, the answer is yes, we would be open to a discussion, absolutely.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Winters, my one was similar to what David said, but Aroha mai, I might have missed it when you presented, but the groups like Search and Rescue and that in our lakes and the other people who are doing the works, are they going to be contracted or funded to carry out the work, or is it all done by just TLAs?
Oh no, this is just a small portion of their funding, Trevor. The Crown, for example, Coast Guard, I know a bit about. The Crown contribute about $2 million a year into the National Office. That filters down to all the units. We get service level agreements and other philanthropic funding for our Coast Guard and surf life saving. So this is just a portion of it. It's not the whole budget for all these organisations. It's just a help up as opposed to the whole lot.
Thank you.
Councillor Kumar, then Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, everyone. My question is, how do you measure the growth and success of such an event as to get to more students across to better education?
I don't know if they'd be able to.
God, wish I had a crystal ball. But no, I think it's. I've got to stress, Councillor, it's only a trial. It'll be for 12 months. Some would say, and I imagine the tertiary institutes would say, we need to have the trial extended beyond 1 year to get a realistic feedback and calculation as to what the pickup was with students. But it will be certainly monitored, and the comparison will be there for the ratepayers to see if they want to continue it. They may not even want us to even go into that space, let's be honest. But that's the call from the tertiary institutes, and it'll be closely monitored, and there'll be feedback. And I can assure you the statistics will be fed back to this organisation as well as our own.
Councillor Hunt.
it's on Focus 3, which is the electric bus. Do you have any in your fleet at the moment? When would we expect to see the first one? What route would be chosen for that? And for those that trial, it would be great if the opportunity was for it to be the length of a degree for those people, say from here, from Rotorua over to Tauranga, so that if those people know that for the period of the degree they're doing, that they have that surety of getting that transport. Because I think a year is inadequate, because you take a few months to get people on board with the idea that it may be possible to do it, by the time they get themselves organised, and then the trial's ended. So I'm just wondering if that's possibility to be discussed.
I think you can take it on board that we'll be pushing hard to extend the trial out beyond 12 months to get a realistic feedback as to how successful or otherwise it was. If we had a couple of days, I could fill you in terms of the infrastructure issues in Tauranga, but you wouldn't want to hear that, I can assure you. But we rolled out the blueprint in Tauranga, as you know, December last year. It's well reported in the media. It's had a raft of issues for a raft of reasons. But fundamental to the blueprint was a commitment that we gave to the people of Tauranga that included in the new contract would be the rollout of 5 electric buses. The delivery has been delayed, but New Zealand Bus has told us that they will be hitting the roads in Tauranga, 5 buses, in August.
Fantastic.
So they are on their way. They're incredibly expensive, as we know. Electric buses are also, dare I say, very, very heavy vehicles. So it has a huge impact, as Stavros and others would know, on the infrastructure and the roading infrastructure. Some of these, because they're basically big batteries that are hitting the roads. But no, there's 5 being rolled out in Tauranga, and you can have the assurance from Councillor Winters and myself that we're pushing real hard to have electric buses rolled out in our own town as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you for your presentation this morning. With regard to climate change that I'm asking a question on, under item 3 there, focus area 3, sorry, the flood protection and working with DOC and landowners with regard to the likes of the streams out at Nongata. Is that in full progress at the moment, clearing up blockages and so forth?
A lot of work going on to do with the Nongata, as Councillor Thurston and Strumper would be aware of. We've got a community reference group started up there, and it's certainly putting the heat on the staff in terms of delivering on the 5 work streams that we have, which includes, we've added, you would be aware, of course, of the report, the independent review that came out in December. There were a whole lot of recommendations in that, and we've added to that and added the upper catchment work, which looks at how can we mitigate peak flows coming down from the top of the catchment before it gets down to the built-up area. So you'll see the work rolling out over the next few months on that, and I can't really say, Stavros and I have been working very hard on this, but I can't really say what shape it's going to take at this stage in terms of the engineering response, but we'll certainly be taking account of climate change in terms of making sure it's future-proof so that it's not just going to apply for the next decade or 2, but does protect communities out there for the next 100 years.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for coming along and giving us the opportunity, first of all, to see the priority areas and to consult. To get some feedback and some questions from us.
Do the last
there
few
any
slides, please,
thank you.
because it comes back to the numbers now.
Oh, fine. Thank you. All right then.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes. Have you got a few more?
There is a 4th slide. This is the last slide of questions being asked, and we didn't dwell on this because it is really to do with Tauranga and another trial to do with getting school students to school, and the theory is, of course, that will reduce congestion on the roads with cars, because there'll be fewer cars on the road taking kids to school. So this is target rated on the Tauranga city people only, so it won't affect ratepayers in Rotorua. So that's why we didn't dwell on it, but it is in the information packs that you'll get. And then we had a few other slides to do with finance, which Debbie can cover if you wish to, or if you're in a hurry, we can.
No, thank you. Yes, no, you can present those. That'll be fine. Probably won't be taking any questions on them though, that's just it. Thank you.
E tū ana hau ki te mihi mahana kia koutou katoa. So our financial strategy sets out how we plan to fund our work program over the 10 years, and obviously the draft annual plan is an update on our year 2 long-term plan budget. So there have been some changes, and the slide here captures our proposed capital expenditure for 1920. Total capital expenditure at this point, 47.3 million. The lion's share of this is obviously our flood protection and control, heavily impacted by the 2017 floods. And also we have some work continuing in corporate services around building upgrades in Tauranga and Whakatane.
Debbie, you're welcome to sit down if you wish, and just if you just move the microphone closer to you.
Thank you.
Because we've got, we're streaming live and sometimes it's a bit difficult for folks out there to hear. Thank you.
In terms of our proposed operating expenditure for 1920, $135.5 million. And the breakdown between the different groups of activities is set out in our draft consultation document and on the slide. The overall highlights at this point in terms of our proposed rates increases, total average rates increase of 6.5%. The draft consultation document sets out that of the general rates increase, this accounts for 3.8% of the total increase. Proposed borrowings, all of our capital work program since the beginning of the long-term plan is funded through borrowings from the local government funding authority. So the proposed net borrowings as at the 30th of June 2020 is $90 million. In terms of our forecast total rates by territorial authority, our consultation document sets these out. We do set out what we've rated for in 1819, what we'd proposed as part of year 2 of the long-term plan, and the draft annual plan for 1920 is also captured. For Rotorua, we've set out there the forecast average rates increase, draft annual plan, average household $440. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Any final wrap-up comments from you? Thank you. We've allowed a half an hour and I'm pleased that you've been able to present as you wanted. Kaitapai? Oh, sorry, Your Worship. Well, it needs to be quick.
Yeah, it will be. Thanks for the simplicity of your focus areas. That makes it easy, and that's how we're going out too. Just when you are out with your meetings, there is a bit of a focus needed that came through the Te Arawa Lakes about our need to explain to the public how to pick up catfish nets. If you could pick that up as an education component along the side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you. So we'll move to our staff reports. And our first one, thank you, that the report, preparation of pre-election report 2019 be received. I'd like a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. It's been moved and seconded that the report be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I think he was waving. Thank you. And I'm going to invite Una to overview the report. Thank you.
Good morning, members, and welcome. So what we've got in front of you today is an item or a report to bring in front of you for awareness and information at this point in time. So in the lead up to an election, the Chief Executive has the responsibility to publish and present a pre-election report. For this council, this will be the third pre-election report that we have undertaken, and it has to be published before the 2nd of August. Really, the pre-election report has two objectives, one being around to sort of highlight the financial position and expenditure of the council, but it's also an opportunity to encourage candidates to stand, but also for the community to see what the council is grappling with. What are the challenges ahead, and what is the council looking to undertake and have before them over the next 3 years? So we wanted to bring this in front of you today so that you were well aware that this is a piece of work that is currently in the very early stages of being prepared, an opportunity so that there were no surprises, and just making it really clear that this is one document in the suite of all documents that come out from this organisation, which is considerably different. This report is not adopted by standing elected members. This is a report that is designed and published by the Chief Executive, and that responsibility, as of late last month, has actually sort of been given more weight to that around the facilitation and active promotion of encouraging people to, our community to get out and vote. So I think I'll leave that there at this stage, and if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take those.
Thank you. I just wondered, perhaps, Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add to it? No, thank you. Thank you. Some questions? Yes, Your Worship.
You've got the financial strategy that would be part of it. What about the well-being of the community? Does that get included in this? The snapshot of where we're at as a community?
The issue around that isn't a set requirement, but I guess the advice in particular from Solgum and LGNZ is that a pre-election report is an opportunity to go beyond just, the requirements around the finances. This is an opportunity to really communicate with the community as well about those issues that are in front of the council and the district, and the well-beings is potentially an area that could be covered off in that.
Thank you. I would have thought that the well-beings could impact on the financial situation of the council, very much so. Good question, Your Worship. And now, Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Donaldson.
I've been following the Local Electoral Act amendments that came in at the end of March. Now, it's very similar to a pre-fu, which is what's required prior to a general election for central government, and similar in Australia as well. I just wondered, Una, you mentioned the added responsibility on the Chief Executive Officer with those legislative changes that came in at the end of March, put more emphasis on the responsibilities of the CEO. So one thing I want to make sure, and Her Worship mentioned the financial side of it, does it focus on the Capital Works program and what we consulted with the community over during the LTP process, because that LTP lasts 3 years? So will that be emphasised that we have already been out and this is the community's expectation in those Capital Works areas?
So on page 14 of the report, you will see there's a little diagram there that outlines the retrospective information and the prospective information. And one of those under the prospective is outlining the major projects that Council has on its books, effectively, for the 3 years following the election. And as you're well aware, our Capital Works program was adopted for the LTP, and that would be included in that area.
Further to that, Madam Chair, if I may, to the Chief Executive Officer, do you give a summary or a rundown on where we are at with those particular projects, and if there are any inhibiting factors in terms of making process? And one I'm thinking of in particular is the museum, because it's just not the simple case of going in with jackhammers and concrete and slapping it around a building. The reality is you've got all these other agencies that are involved in that the rebuild or the strengthening of that building. And I just wondered, do you make comment or give the community an update so that they know when they go to the election they have a clear understanding of where those particular projects, those big moves that Una talked about, where they're at and what progress has been made, bearing in mind what we've done in the LTP. I think it's really important.
Look, I think through the chair, the answer to that is that the purpose of the pre-election report is to provide prospective candidates and the general public a clear view of what are the challenges that council is facing over the next 3 years, what are the projects, and as you outline those projects, my expectation would be that we would have to actually provide information on each of them. Where are they at? What are the key challenges around them? And what is the current state? So I think the answer is quite simply yes.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bit of a rhetorical question really is, I think the clear message to standing elected members is hands off. We can't influence the flavour of the pre-election report. It's a legal requirement of the Chief Executive, and I'm happy to move point 2.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Sturt, and I am going to put the motion now that the committee notes the development and publication process proposed for the pre-election report 2019. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Recommendation 2, the election and communications protocols for elected members. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that report? Mr. Thomas, thank you. Mrs. Trumper, thank you. That the report, election and communication protocols for elected members be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Good morning, Rick. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, kia ora koutou. Just an overview on the election and communication protocol for elected members. We all know that 2019 we have local authority elections coming up. So the purpose of this report is to give elected members statutory guidance regarding the election and communication protocols, including social media. And you'll note that on the first page of attachment 1, which is the actual protocol, we look at providing information for elected members around the difference between and the awareness of business as usual and electioneering and campaigning. So there's the awareness around that, that's part of the policy. Also, the use of council resources, and what are council resources? They include computers and mobiles and iPads, buildings, meeting rooms, etc. And they're all council resources that need to, that we need to be aware of, particularly during the pre-election period, and the use of these during that pre-election period, which is the 12th of July to 20th of October, that 3-month period prior to the election. Also information around social media accounts and council social media accounts. So there's a table at the back of the protocols which identifies council media. So there's like Facebook pages and Instagrams and the like there. I have another handout that I will, I have an updated handout that I will issue to you, or hand out to you, because we initially omitted the 2 Facebook pages from our Lakes Community Board and Rural Community Board, so I have those to hand out with you. There's no other change as far as the protocols, and thank you, Shirley and Phil, for bringing that to our attention. Needless to say, and this is very important, that you have an important role to undertake right up to the election. So you're elected members and you still have to act in that capacity, but it's having the awareness of business as usual again, and the clear distinction between electioneering and your campaign should you decide to stand. Protocols are generally applicable at all times. However, the special need of awareness, again, at that 3-month pre-election period, 12 July, 12 October. Happy to take questions, but just a reminder that Rotorua-Tait's Council Electoral Officer Warwick Lamp from elections.com will be here at around 11 o'clock to hold a workshop with you, elected members, around these protocols and open conversation about any areas of concerns or information that you may need there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Rick. This will be very helpful, and the good thing is, if in doubt, we can always come to you for clarification. And I think it is important so that there is a fine line we don't wish to cross, and so just to make sure that we err on the right side, and we know that you're available, and this will be very helpful to us. I know there are a couple of questions that people would like to ask, Your Worship.
May not be a question you can answer, Rick, but we're starting to be asked, when are the Te Tato or Te Arawa elections?
I believe they're August, are they?
Thank you. Is there, does one of the members have a...
Yes. Off the top of my head, I seem to remember July, but I can have a quick look. The Te Tato elections are prior to the local body elections.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Gould.
Chair, thank you, Mr Dunn, for your report today. I've got a question on the iPad. As an elected official, my name and my email address, my phone number and my home address is listed on the council website. And you're saying the cut-off period is from the 12th of July to the 20th of October. What happens if I get a ratepayer who sends me an email about the election process on my iPad between that particular period? I take it I'm not allowed to answer him on the iPad, is that correct?
Oh, just a minute, thank you. Just to get that clear, I might ask Una to respond to that.
So the question you've raised there around, it's actually two, I believe, questions rolled into one there. And we can go into this in greater detail in the workshop because it is actually something that is personal to yourselves and maybe not a question that the general public need at this stage. But in summary, the iPad is a tool that you have to undertake your role as an elected member. If during the election period you receive an email to your RLC account that pertains to your election campaign, you should reply to them on your personal email. So it is keeping, and it's that awareness that Rick just spoke about, the difference between business as usual as being a standing elected member versus actively campaigning. But we can go into that in much more detail. You'll be able to ask Warwick questions about a lot more of that and tease that out in that workshop.
Can I just get clear too, Una? We have to work as councillors right up till the day.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. So we do have our jobs to do. Councillor Stewart, thank you.
I have a similar question. Notwithstanding the report, Rick and Una, thank you for bringing this to our attention because there are obviously clear demarcations in terms of serving councillors who stand again and those people who aren't currently councillors who are standing for the first time. There's two different scenarios. Just one thing, this report indicates strongly for me that if it's a council-owned resource, campaigning and electioneering is taboo. However, with my private Facebook, my private emails, my private campaigning is my responsibility. But the question that was just answered certainly helps because we are going to get electioneering issues come up on our council iPads, etc., based on what Councillor Gould has just said, because openly and it is advertised, contact your councillor on Karen Hunt at rlc.co.gov.nz. So I think if I have any doubt, I will be coming to both Una and to Rick. But can we just have that clearly clarified that if it's a council-owned resource, no campaigning. If it's private, it's hell for leather.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. That was a clear summary of what we're talking about here. Thank you for that. And to reiterate that, yes, and councillors, if you do have any areas of concern around responding to community questions and answers, we are more than happy to assist with that.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick, thanks for your briefing today. Why is this chappie Lamp coming down to talk to the elected members, and you don't appear to have advertised it for any other candidates that may be looking to stand? Is there a reason why you've excluded any other person?
I think Una was going to respond to that.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think this question was raised in the last or the previous O&M committee as well. The protocols for standing elected members are quite different to those that are a first-time candidate. This is an opportunity for you to speak firsthand with our electoral officer. So our electoral officer is Warwick Lamp, who is electionsnz.com, sorry. Yes, so we appoint him to undertake that process and run the elections for us. And our staff, through Rick as Deputy Electoral Officer, support him in that role. As we discussed a couple of months ago, there will be a candidates evening, and Warwick comes in and goes through an open public meeting for anyone who wishes to stand as an elected member, and they get all of the information and advice and support that they need to run as a first-time candidate. We're also looking at running a couple of additional, maybe smaller or more of a workshop style or more of a caravan type approach, where candidates can come and get more information, talk, receive updates and stuff on projects. So we're just working through the detail on that at the moment. But the objective of the workshop today is to ensure that standing elected members really understand and have a really good awareness between the role of business as usual versus campaigning, and in particular for that period starting on the 12th of July.
As a supplement, do you have a date or a time frame for when the rest of the candidates may be advised with Mr. Lamb?
We don't have a final date for that currently. Just trying to tie it in, hopefully, and I think from memory last time round, it was towards the end of July, and it does work really well if that candidates evening is on or around the same time as the pre-election report comes out, because it means that all candidates then have that information in that pre-election report. So we'll get that date for the sort of the global candidates evening finalised as soon as we can.
Thank you. Hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, for the benefit of them, obviously. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, can I say I support that answer from Una, because until elections, nominations are open or called for in July, nobody's a candidate, really. And so, as elected members, incumbents, we have to be very, very careful the way we proceed. And it seems like there's pressure to get into election mode earlier than the legislation requires. But my question is on Appendix 1 and the social media channel list. And because this is in public for transparency's sake, and I recall going through this process of unliking a whole bunch of pages last year, their night market, Skyway, are they council social media channels? Their Facebook pages, and also it's a bit different this year with the aquatic. The aquatic's under contracted out management. So is that a council social media channel, the aquatic centre, or is that not? That's my question.
Thank you for that question. Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I would take those as being council resource.
Thank you. Mr. Berryman-Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, just for clarification, the Te Tātou voting packs go out on the 17th of July, so that'll be the timing for the Te Tātou elections this year.
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you. I'd like to think that common sense would prevail in this area for most of us, and I do hope it's not going to get bigger than Ben-Hur, so that you don't know whether you can make a move here or make a move there, because, you know, sort of, do you know what I mean? So, thank you. So there are no further questions. I'm going to call for a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Gould. As there's a seconder, please, to that the committee recommends to Council to adopt the election and communication protocols for elected members. So it's been moved by Councillor Gould, seconded by Councillor Hunt. I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Where are we? Thank you. I'm sorry. Page 24, recommendation 3. Yes, page 24. As the report, Assessment of Water and Sanitary Services 2018. Could I have a mover and a thank you, Your Worship? Thank you, Mr. Berriman-Kemp, that report be received. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Good morning, Stavros.
Morena tatu katoa, through you, Madam Chair. I will very briefly outline the purpose of this report. You would note in the background of this report that under the Local Government Act, Section 125, councils are required to carry assessment of their water and sanitary services from time to time. This council has carried out a formal assessment of its water and sanitary services in 2005. But that it does not mean that it doesn't mean that, you know, we have not been regularly assessing our water and sanitary services. In fact, those services are continuously assessed both at the annual plan, asset management plans, and LTP levels on a 3-yearly basis. What these reports says, that's in front of you right now, is that we have made an effort to review the document itself and to make some pertinent upgrades to that. And the proposal here is that, you know, is to fully review the water and sanitary services over the next long-term plan of the council for 2021 to 2031. There are 2 reasons for that. One is that is a time where our next 30-year infrastructure strategy will again be reviewed, but also as discussed previously and specifically in the workshops we had for the annual plan, I have outlined that the government is now in the process of reviewing some key government policies with regards to drinking water, wastewater and stormwater. And it does make sense for us to wait to see the outcomes of those reviews. So they will inform our next infrastructure strategy and obviously this council's long-term planning. What I would like to give you an assurance at this point in time, the current assessment of water sanitary services has not identified any issues of critical significance or critical risk in the organization. There are some small communities that are not covered by our main water reticulation supply systems, but obviously the new government policy is targeted towards that direction and we'll see the outcome of that policy review and take it from there. At the same time, we are in the process, as you're aware, that we are expanding and enhancing our wastewater treatment services, both at this urban level, Raukawa-Tait, Rotorua, we're considering it Tarawera situation, and obviously we are well in, and Mamako obviously is our long-term project too, which we are undertaking a program with the regional council to evaluate the impacts of the wastewater systems in Mamako at this point in time. Stormwater is subject to our application for a comprehensive resource consent for all stormwater, and we are in the process of conducting a cultural impact assessment for that. So all these activities are in progress, and we're making additional improvements to our cemeteries and our sanitarium and our crematorium. So obviously these works are consistent with our assessment. So we recommend that the review and the update of the current policy is noted by the council. And also note that we will conduct a more thorough assessment and review during the next LTP. Take questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Stavros. Yes, Your Worship.
The process behind updating this, Stavros, was it just a desktop exercise, or do you have to go out and inspect every one of these components behind the report?
Your Worship, it's a combination of that. Obviously, we maintain asset management plans and network management plans that gives us significant indications as to the compliance of these systems against relevant statutes, but also where we have any concerns, we do individual site monitoring. So it's a combination of efforts, that accumulates into this report.
Thank you. Ms. Berryman Kemp? Oh, sorry, Ms. Mohi.
Morena tātai, Stavros. Just two questions. Just looking through the report, the appendix document assessment. Just wondering about the numbers on the tangata whenua community assessment around Urupa. From the report reading, there was a statement saying there was about 30 internments a year that could be attributed to private Urupa. Just querying that number, I would have thought it's a lot higher than that. And the other thing is when understanding that Urupa provide a service to the community that takes a bit of pressure off the council's requirement, whether there's a consideration, or I'd like to put that forward to council, to give an exemption to water supply rating to Urupa, to acknowledge the SIP, the burden that's taken on board by private or Māori community and taken off the council. So I'll just put that to the council. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Gina. Look, I'm sorry, I don't have the accurate numbers of internment. I rely on information that was given to me, and I acknowledge might not be very accurate. But certainly, in terms of our next LTP, if we need to consider the function and the service that Europa provide into the entire community, and obviously is something we need to consider as part and parcel of our LTP and water provision assessments. I have no problem with that at all.
Mr. Berryman Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, I've got two lots of questions. So one is just a statement regarding what Gina just outlined. Certainly, I found that number of internments in Urupa probably significantly light. And just to signal to the committee, certainly one marae that I'm affiliated to, there's increasing demand due to the cost of council available plots. And we're getting local rural community members, people with a very tenuous whakapapa link, looking to be buried on Urupa purely based on cost. So my message is that I think that component is likely to increase as the years go on. So that's just one statement there. But the main questions that I had on the report, and thank you for the report, which is comprehensive, but I guess I had some questions because I have a sense that the report does tick a local government legislative requirement, but it felt to me to be missing a number of key components, particularly if we consider the four well-beings and more of a economic, social, cultural and environmental assessment of water and sanitary services. I note point 3 there, you have a recommendation to consider updating the assessment in the next LTP in light of expected NPS changes in the three waters space. But my question is, how does this report take into account the NPS from 2017, which actually clearly outlines the role of Te Manawa Te Wai and expectations on councils to incorporate Te Manawa Te Wai into, and iwi, into the management of fresh water. That is a component I find quite lacking in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Berryman. I think I will respond to that at two levels. This the water and sanitary services assessment, and, excuse me, under this specific section of the Local Government Act is dedicated to assessing the sanitary and health impacts of the services into the community. It's quite a narrow framework. Where those four well-beings are reflected into a long-term management of the three water services, for example, it is our long-term plan and it is our long-term infrastructure strategy. And again, we would highlight a couple of areas which are not exhaustive, but I think it's quite important to indicate how we incorporate those elements into our long-term infrastructure strategy. For example, wastewater management and reticulation. Obviously, those areas are subject to environmental, economic, and cultural impact assessments. And obviously, those, each one of the supply and management systems incorporate the four well-beings. Water supply, as you're aware, we are currently engaged with the one source supply with the Ngāti Rangiwehi, the Taniwha Spring, for example, which is a joint resource consent application with Mana Whenua in that respect. And I would suggest that would be a future model of how we jointly manage, this kind of concerns. The stormwater management and flood protection system, obviously, it's quite multifaceted. I'll have to admit that we have some road ahead of us to travel in that direction, especially with the climate change. But I think a pilot scheme would be the Nongotaha floods reviewing scheme, where we have a comprehensive community reference group that works with both councils to address risk mitigation and the impacts on potential flooding. And of course, that's not just about flooding, it's about environmental, cultural, land management impacts, community safety and well-being and so on. So I think all these kind of programs and policies incorporate well-beings, but you should expect to find reference to all these areas in our long-term infrastructure strategy that's reflected in our long-term plan. And that's what we're saying. This is an element with regards to the health of these services, but the comprehensiveness of all these other factors and the government national policy statements, especially with the government's emerging policy statement for the three waters management, it's will be distilled into our next LTP, and that's the approach at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Oh, so just
yes, we're not up for it's not up for debate. So unless it's a question,
no. Supplemental question, and thank you for the response. Therefore, I guess based on that, can I assume that recommendation 3 will be extended to not only national policy changes in three waters, but also to take into account the 2017 national MPS on fresh water?
Mr. Merriman, yes, I think if you want to amend that, yes, but I think I see it as a self-evident that when we developing long-term strategies, we incorporate all the national and policies and regional policies. So I think that's a part and parcel of our aspect. If you want to note it as specifically, I have no objection to that, but nevertheless, I would like to give you the assurance that in developing our infrastructure strategy, we are cognizant of and trying always to comply with the prevailing policies.
Thank you, and I'm happy with the explanation that you've given there, Stavros. Councillor Gould, then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Michael, for your report this morning. I'm quoting from the recommendation number 3, in light of the expected national policy changes in the three waters. Does that mean if there's a policy change in the three waters for the next 3 years or the long-term plan, you'll come back to council with the proposed changes which the government are doing, which we have to apply and work through?
Yes, Mr. Councillor Gould, of course. If any government policy emerges that impacts onto the way we deliver or the way we plan for these water services, it needs to be reported to the council because it's going to have a flow-on effect on your long-term plan and your infrastructure strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart and Councillor Donaldson.
I too, Madam Chair, join my colleagues in thanking you for this extensive report, and some of the questions that have been raised regarding national policy statements are for a different platform. But Stavros, the production of this particular report, will that be shared with Rotorua Ministry of Health and the DHB? Because I think they need to be aware of where we're heading in terms of these public facilities. I know we're not charged under the Local Government Act to do that, but I think they're pretty quick to point the finger at us that we're not doing this, that and the other. But in this report, it clearly states where we're heading in terms of all things, right down to talking about the travelling public. And one of the areas of concern I have is the disposal of effluent from motorhomes, and I don't think the facilities are sufficient enough to have them at the motor camps and one at the sewage treatment plant. But that's not for us to provide those facilities. I mean, it would certainly signal to Rotorua Ministry of Health and the DHB that those services, in my view, and certainly some of the travelling public's view, are inadequate. And we certainly don't want to see the dumping continue at the lakefront in those areas where freedom camping occurs. But I just wondered, my question is, will this report and its importance be highlighted with those other agencies?
Councillor State, I think you notice in the under item 3 background, the paragraph will say that this revision and update for the assessment has included input from the medical officer and of health and the Rotorua health department, and of course, once this council has adopted that, we'll be sharing with them. Thank you. Correct.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Stavros, my question was just around the issue of public potable water supplies, and the comment in your report that the Medical Officer of Health had recommended we extend reticulation to communities that aren't reticulated. And I'm mindful of the continued call from some at Moria for reticulation. Our policy seems to stand in the way of that taking place because a number have their own private water supplies, bores out there, and they don't want change. And I see on page, I'm not sure which one it is, but paragraph 235, overall the risk to public health considered moderate for those non-reticulated supplies. And I just wonder, does that impose, I guess, a risk on this organisation that we need to mitigate and change our policy for some of those non-reticulated communities? I'm just questioning where we go in the future with communities such as Moria.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can I sort of take a little step back before I answer that? I think I've reported back into when we were doing the annual plan deliberations or workshop is that the government's approach to that is assessing all those communities and individuals in our country that are not subject to council control and protected water reticulation systems. And personally, even I was surprised that to find out that about 25% of our population in the country, about over 1 million people, have potable water that is not controlled by local authority, either private systems or body corporates or things like that. And of course, councils do have a role to play in terms of education and information in support of DHBs and the health inspectors and so on. But we do not have a direct responsibility at the moment. And I think what we expect the government to come with their policies in the next few months is going to be do that, bring all these communities back under your umbrella and put it into your reticulation system, and therefore you apply uniform and consistent and reliable standards of health protection. That's what I'm saying. We're waiting for that approach, for the policy statement to come through, and that will inform our LTP, and that will set up for us an infrastructure 30-year plan, or earlier, whatever we think is appropriate, implement.
Thank you for that answer, and through you, Madam Chair, just a quick supplementary question on that. So I guess we're looking for a mechanism similar to wastewater that if a reticulation system is put in, people must connect to the public council-operated supply, which is not there now, I gather.
Correct.
Thank you. Ms Mohi?
Kia ora. You may have just answered that question for me. I was just wanting to pick up on some of those non-reticulated areas, particularly Kaingaroa Forest Village. So I understand they have their own private supply. But I might have missed some of your feedback just on your last question. You mentioned you're waiting on, that was the bit I missed, somebody to initiate that process. So can you just explain how a group, or just pick up on that piece, how a community, say like Kaingaroa, would be able to, or what would be the mechanism into which they might choose to enter into this process? And I'm not just wastewater, I understand they do have some issues with their sewage as well. I grew up in Kaingaroa, so I'm a part of their Facebook page, and some of the things that come up a lot is the water limits. Pumps break down, nobody's got water for days. And some of the issues around particularly the maintenance of the sewage system.
Kia ora, Ms. Mohi. Look, in simple levels, we have limited ability to compel communities, to join the system at the moment. However, the expectations that the government policy statement, the regulations, and the regulatory body would anticipate to be ready around about July this year, August, that's what the advice I have. It will create a system, the mechanism, the tool to allow compellment of these communities to join. And of course, once they come in, then there's going to be harmonization and standardization of these services. And wastewater services, potable water services, they will be equated across the whole of the district in a uniform and standard way. So we need that regulation from government to enable us to do that. So I share your concerns, but I think at the moment we cannot force people to join if they don't want to join. Yeah.
And Your Worship, did you have a final question?
Just a question. See from the tenor of the questions on what is really an operational report, so it's an update report. If we were to move with the three waters, and especially the regulatory framework that could come in around drinking water, what would the potential cost impact be to Rotorua?
Your Worship, I don't have the figures exact in my head, but in talking to my colleagues in the Department of Internal Affairs and Department of Health, the estimate for the entire country is about 500 million.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I would like to now thank you for the discussion, councillors, Your Worship, and committee members. Now, I'd like to put 2 and 3. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper, for recommendation 2 and 3, that the committee recommends to council that the assessment of water and sanitary services 2018 as attached to the report be adopted, and 3, that the committee notes that a further update of the assessment of the water and sanitary services will be made for the 2021-2031 long-term plan in light of the expected national policy changes in the three waters. Move Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Trumper. I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. I am going to press on, councillors, into the council excluded because we do have Mr. Lamb here with us, and I'd like to start that pretty much soon after 11 o'clock. So, so may I have a... We are going to go into the public excluded. Thank you. There are 2 confidential reports to be considered, apart from the adoption of our confidential minutes. The request to approve the purchase of land along the Rotorua Eastern Arterial Alignment and fee increases at Waikite Valley Thermal Pools, Springs and Spa. Those 2 items to be considered. First of all, they're in public excluded to enable commercial or industrial negotiations and commercial sensitivity. So It's been moved by Her Worship and seconded by Mr Thomas that we go into confidential. All those in favour, please say aye.